Before we get started, I just want everyone to understand that this isn't a personal attack whatsoever. None of these videos are personal attacks. I don't know any of the candidates well enough to judge their character. All these videos are trying to do is respond and critique to everything that was said at the People's Forum with regards to renters together. With that being said, let's get into it. Oddly, Wynn's response was very similar to John's and Caleb's response, which you'll see in another video. Here's the first part of it.
Yeah, I'm not particularly in favor of mandatory rental inspections either, but I think, what we did with our old program when it was voted out, we put in a registration program, and we put in this program where any renter can call and the code office will come and inspect for free. The problem has been that some people aren't calling. And the commission has put in place where the lease should include that now. We voted on that because I could see that was a hole.
Take a second and think about this. The main issue with this optional housing inspection program is that it allows housing in Manhattan to be unsafe. It allows landlords and property management companies to still advertise and encourage people to rent these spaces out. That's what happened with Audrey Wilson. She was encouraged to rent that home, that apartment. Now, you see the major issue with that is that these renters are signing a lease, a legally binding contract, and they're moving themselves and all of their possessions into these homes. If you think that a 18-year-old college student who has never rented in their entire lives, who has never signed a lease contract, if you think that they'll be able to identify every minor detail that might turn out to be a huge issue later, maybe a life-threatening one, or any kind of issue that impacts their health or well-being, you're crazy. There's a reason why we have housing inspectors, and that is because they are trained and they have the education to identify these issues that are in a house that normal people can't identify. If she would have called and say, hey, there's bats on my house, please inspect. And if they would have responded and scheduled a time to finally come out and take a look at it, the thing is that she already experienced bats flying around her house, bats pooping on all of her stuff, bats terrorizing her pets, and she was not able to secure any kind of legal representation which would have held the landlord accountable. And it's not like once they identify the issue, the landlord can just fix it like that and it's gone, poof. It takes time. You can't, who knows what these repairs are going to take. In Audrey's story, the landlord was still trying to fix the issue. They were putting bat houses up in the backyard. They were spraying foam in these open holes in the attic or the walls where the bats were coming in, and they were still coming in. The thing is that you can't wait for a disaster to happen and then try to solve it. We need these homes inspected before people move in, before they sign on to a legally binding contract, and before they fully move into this property that may or may not be safe. That way the inspector can say, hey, this isn't safe. There's a way for bats to get in here. We've noticed there's an infestation of mice or rats or insects or whatever, fill in the blank. Hey, we noticed that there's faulty wiring in here and it could start a fire at any second. And you know what? That landlord wouldn't be able to rent that place out. A renter wouldn't be able to put themselves into that unsafe situation, that chaotic situation where they're in a rock and a hard place, where they're dealing with school, where they're dealing with work, and they're dealing with God knows what. They got to take time out of all of that to schedule a time for an inspection, to find new housing that is safe. They got to figure out how are they going to move all their stuff. Can they move all their stuff right away? Do they need to get a storage unit? Do they need to do this? Do they need to do that? How much money do they need to apply? They have to wait for the application to go through. They got to have money for a security deposit. Maybe they need to try to find legal representation to try to get out of the lease. If they can't get out of the lease, they have to do what Audrey did and take another job, 2 jobs while she's doing school to try to pay for all of this. That's chaotic and insane. And 100% of all of those issues can be prevented if the home was inspected before people move in. So an optional inspection program doesn't prevent any of that from happening. There's a reason why cities are implementing a mandatory rental inspection. And it's not because they hate landlords. It's because they don't want the residents to die. One great example that I found was with the city of Sacramento, Texas. Some of their buildings in Sacramento, Texas had wiring that was old and it was faulty. Now, that's not something a renter can identify in a 15-minute walkthrough or at any time they're living in the building, because that wiring is in the walls. Or it could be a faulty electrical panel. That's not stuff renters know a lot about. We kind of naively expect somebody to be responsible enough to inspect these things, to make sure that these systems are still safe and they won't hurt us. So what ended up having is that faulty electrical wiring started a fire and it burned down the whole house and it killed somebody.
A devastating fire in a rental property more than 8 years ago prompted the city to take immediate action. The fire, which resulted in lives lost, was caused because code violations went unnoticed. As a result, the city developed a program to proactively curb code violations in rental homes and apartments, in hope that these common violations don't become unfortunate events in the future. Born from this tragedy was the Rental Housing and Inspection Program, or RIP. The program, which routinely inspects rental properties throughout the city, aims to make sure residents are safe and protected in their homes.
Now, I'm not sure what kind of housing inspection program Sacramento had before that incident, but just think, if that was a optional inspection program, when would have been the right time to call for an inspection? If they would have tried to schedule an inspection before signing a lease, well, they don't know if they're actually going to get the house or not. And the landlord can just say, well, I'm going to choose the people who aren't asking for an inspection. And, they probably thought like, well, I think this house is okay. Like, I don't need to take the time to schedule an inspection sometime. So really, you just can't wait for disaster to happen and then act. You have to do the best you can to prevent disaster. And not to mention, how well does this inspection program work? Here we have the City of Manhattan, Kansas website. And this is their rental registration page. We can go down to request an inspection of your rental unit. Now, you see there's a request interior inspection and report a rental housing issue using report it. Now this one, report it, as you can see, doesn't work. It'll say loading requests, but it will never actually load the requests. You go to create, it doesn't actually work, and it gives a very weird error message that says an error occurred configuring the application, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if you go to the City of Manhattan Report It app for the Android, which is the phone I happen to have, somebody rated it 4 stars but says sometimes what you report doesn't get attention or a response. May 27, 2021. They do have request an interior inspection. This one is a lot harder to test if it actually works or not. And you see, most people don't know that this exists and this is here. And it looks like you might have to wait until they respond back to you, because I don't see anywhere where you can type up or write up anything, any issue.
I think the idea of having a licensed inspector inspect a house before you move in it would be fine, but I'm not sure you've analyzed the cost. I looked that up a couple days ago. For a 1,500 square foot home, it would be $250. If you include mold, which seems to be one of the issues, radon and asbestos, it can be up to $300 more. So you're looking at about $500 to do that inspection. We could pass an ordinance requiring that, but you know who's going to pay for that, right? It's going to be the renter. The renter is going to pay for it. And it's going to put bureaucracy in place, slowing down the rental process. But that could be considered.
And he tries to scare you with this, oh no, there's going to be bureaucracy and it's going to slow everything way down. It's like, sorry, ensuring your safety, it's just too it's just going to slow down the process. It's going to be more paperwork, and people are going to actually have to prove that their home's safe. And oh my, you don't want this. Safety's not good. You don't want safe. It's too complicated. It's too expensive. Just have hope. Just hope you get the housing that's safe. So I don't know if Wynn doesn't know how citywide programs work, or if he's purposely trying to mislead you and think like, wow, this is so expensive. It looks like Wynn simply got onto Googled housing inspection costs, and then just picked some website, and then that's where he got his numbers from, because I'm not sure where else he would get this from. You can't put a price on somebody's safety, but if you did want to know how much it would cost a renter who was living in a college town that had a mandatory rental inspection program, where would you find that information? Well, lucky for us, there is actually a nearby college town that does have a mandatory rental inspection program, and that town is Lawrence. So let's see how much it costs Lawrence. All right, so if you go to City of Lawrence, Kansas, the city's main website, and you go to long-term rental licensing for landlords, you can go to in compliance with City Ordinance 9110. If we click on that, that'll give us all the information we need for the long-term residential rental property code. So here we have all the different costs for rental licensing fees. And here they have the inspection fees and administrative fees. And you can see the inspection fee is $50 and administrative fee of $25. $25 plus $50 plus, let's do worst case scenario, $17. So this is how much money it would cost in Lawrence to have your home inspected. This cost is just for the year it's inspected. This cost isn't every month. This cost isn't every year. This is just when the home needs inspected, which, if that property were to pass the inspection, that home wouldn't be inspected for another 3 to maybe 6 years. Let's say my girlfriend and I's unit was inspected, and this was the cost, and the landlord decided to put that cost on us. So if it was a generous landlord, that landlord would split this cost up as much as possible, as in dividing it equally between every month we're living here. Divided by 2, and it's $46 per person, just for that 1 year it was inspected. Divided again, we're talking about $4 a month. And then he says,
What have I done to try to improve it? I see right now the hole in our program is this communication. I put a request in as part of the city strategic plan to create what I call a renter-landlord mediation program. And it would be designed very much like medical patient advocacy programs. And the idea here would be to have somebody in a community grant office handle it.
Thank you, Wynn.
I don't know why we're making this more complicated than it needs to be. In general, just, ensuring every public building or rental home is up to date on inspections, it cuts out the rest of this mess. Because then it's safe. It's not going to burn down. You're not going to have any wild infestations. Trying to shift this somewhere else isn't going to help anything. And keeping a program that clearly doesn't work very well and doesn't ensure safety. This system doesn't ensure safety. It's just a way of reporting issues. I really wish Wynn would have looked at another city's rental inspection program. Renters, particularly college students and people who've never rented in their entire lives, they're going to assume that housing in Manhattan is going to be similar to every single aspect in their entire life. And that is, there are steps in place to ensure safety. When you cross a bridge, you don't have to think twice about if it's going to collapse or not. When you go to a restaurant, a new restaurant in town, you don't have to think, is this real chicken? Is this going to give me food poisoning? Am I going to die because of this? When you go to a hospital, you don't get checked up by a doctor and think like, oh boy, I hope this is a real doctor and not just somebody pretending to be one. And that's because there's this bureaucracy in place to ensure that our entire lives, we don't have to be worrying, to worry if it's gonna hurt us. Because we know it's freedom from worry. If you're still confused about what a citywide mandatory rental inspection would be like, I'm gonna post right below, either in the description on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, Lawrence's mandatory licensing and rental housing inspection program. And you can see everything you need to know. They've got frequently asked questions. They have all of the laws and regulations, all the information you would need to know to see what it would take. I really don't think we should support a candidate who does not take public safety seriously. When you're driving around Manhattan and you see a Wynn Butler priorities campaign sign in front of an old decaying renter home, you must understand that it's not the renters who are putting those signs up. And hopefully this should give you an idea where Wynn's priorities actually lie.